Okay, let's get one thing straight right off the bat. The greatest weapon of World War II wasn't just a tank or a plane. Sometimes it was a guy with a wrench, a busted truck, and a serious knack for not giving up. When the rule book went out the window, that's when things got really interesting. This video is for historical and educational purposes only. We do not provide instructions or encourage the replication of any devices or techniques. We're talking about the ultimate in on-the-job training. Picture this. You're in the middle of nowhere. Your official gear is broken or gone, and the enemy's coming. You look around. What do you see? Junk, wreckage, scrap. And to a certain kind of soldier, that wasn't junk. That was a hardware store. That was opportunity. This is the story of the scrap tech warriors, the mechanics, farmers, and tinkerers who fought a war of ingenuity with whatever they could scrounge. First, you gotta understand the mindset. This wasn't about fancy degrees. This was street-smart science, a get-her-done attitude backed by life-or-death motivation. An old sergeant from the Pacific Theater once said, and I'm paraphrasing here, "The Army gives you the textbook answer. The battlefield gives you a pop quiz, and the only cheat sheet is the trash pile." Every military had these folks. The Americans called it Yankee ingenuity for a reason. The Brits had their make do and mend spirit. The Germans, when they were running low, got real creative with what they called Behelfsmäßig, basically, makeshift everything. It was a global phenomenon of pure, distilled problem solving. Now, let's hit the road, or what passed for a road. Vehicles took a beating, and factory parts were a world away, so the mechanics in the motor pool became magicians. Take the famous Jeep. Fantastic vehicle, but it wasn't a tank. Soldiers wanted more protection, more firepower. So they added it. Historical photos show Jeeps with welded-on armor plates from destroyed vehicles, making little ad hoc armored cars. They mounted machine guns on pintle stands made from plumbing pipe. There's even an account of a unit in North Africa who took the rotating turret ring and machine gun from a downed German aircraft and welded it onto a Jeep, creating their own makeshift anti-aircraft vehicle. It was ugly, it was unbalanced, but it worked. Then there were the trucks. When a truck's engine gave out and the right replacement wasn't around, you'd find a substitute. There are documented cases of tank engines, ones from lighter, knocked-out tanks, being shoehorned into heavy trucks to keep supply lines moving. The fit was never perfect. The wiring was a nightmare, but it got the truck rolling. That's the scrap tech motto. If it fits, it ships. Alright, this one sounds crazy, but it's true. When you run out of steel to make heavy guns, what's left? Concrete. I'm not pulling your leg. Towards the end of the war, especially for forces in fixed defensive positions, there were experiments and field applications with concrete artillery. The concept was to use a steel liner for the barrel's inner surface, but the massive structural support and the carriage could be made from reinforced concrete. These weren't precision instruments. They were area denial weapons, fortress guns. You'd pour the concrete into a form right there at the emplacement. The recoil was monstrous, and accuracy was, let's say, general. But if you're defending a beach and you need to lob a large shell a few miles out to sea, a concrete gun could do the job. It was a one-and-done kind of solution, but in a desperate fight, it was a solution. Back to the infantry. The tank is the king, and you're a peasant with a pipe. Game on. Beyond the mines, soldiers developed direct fire pipe weapons. These were the granddaddies of the modern recoilless rifles, but born in a welding shop. Accounts from the Eastern Front describe the use of large-diameter industrial pipes, maybe from a factory or a construction site. One end was heavily reinforced and sealed, with a small touch hole for ignition. You'd pack it with a homemade propellant charge, sometimes just bundled up small arms powder, and then load a projectile. That projectile could be anything: a machined steel bolt, a solid steel slug, even a shaped charge head if they were lucky. To fire it, you'd often have it mounted on a makeshift tripod or the back of a truck. The operator would stand to the side, trigger it from a distance with a long cord, and hope. The backblast was terrifying, and the whole contraption might just disintegrate. But if it hit, it could punch through a tank's thinner side or rear armor. It was the definition of a Hail Mary pass. Now, let's talk about the masters of scrap tech, the partisans and resistance fighters. These folks operated entirely behind enemy lines. No supply drops? No problem. They created hidden workshops in forests, in basements, in sewers. These weren't just guys making pipe guns. These were full-on underground factories. They'd salvage dud bombs and artillery shells for explosives. They'd use alarm clocks, batteries, and wire to make sophisticated time bombs and detonators. One of the most ingenious historical techniques was the production of Stens, or simple submachine guns. British SOE provided basic stamped metal designs that could be made in a small machine shop with minimal tooling. Partisans would make the parts, assemble them, and be in business. They also became experts at vehicle disguise. A truck needed to look civilian to move supplies. They'd repaint it, change the markings, use fake panels. It was a deadly game of mechanical disguise. Their entire operational capability was a monument to scrap tech ingenuity. They proved you could run a war from a junkyard if you had the brains and the nerve. Here's the thing a lot of folks miss. This stuff had a huge psychological impact. Imagine you're a conventional soldier, rolling along in your properly manufactured tank. You expect the enemy to have proper weapons. Then, you get hit and disabled by what looks like a sewer pipe welded to a wagon. It's confusing. It's demoralizing. It makes you doubt everything. These scrap tech weapons were unpredictable. They didn't follow the manuals. That gave their users a weird kind of advantage. The enemy couldn't anticipate what they'd do next, because half the time the guys building them didn't know until they tried it. It was asymmetric warfare before the term was cool. But the scrap tech story wasn't just about blowing things up. Sometimes it was about making things work. Let's talk about communication. Radios broke, they got wet, they ran out of batteries. So what did they do? They improvised. There are accounts of soldiers using the electrical systems from wrecked vehicles as makeshift power sources for field radios. They'd cannibalize components, resolder connections with heat from a torch, and get that vital link to command back online. It wasn't pretty, but a crackly connection beats no connection at all. And then there were the concrete mortars. Now, I told you about concrete artillery, but on a smaller scale, this was a real thing. In static defensive positions, like on some Pacific islands, troops would literally cast small mortar tubes in place using concrete mixed with aggregate from the coral or rocks around them. They'd use a steel pipe as the inner liner to form the smooth bore. The base plate would be a thick slab of the same stuff. These were last-ditch, fixed-position weapons. You couldn't move them. But if you were dug in and expecting an assault, having a few extra tubes to lob explosive shells could make all the difference. Talk about building your own battlefield from the ground up. Now let's shift gears, literally. Vehicle improvisation went way past just fixing engines. It was about creating entirely new functions. Take the humble truck again. There's a famous piece of footage showing GIs in Europe who took a standard 2.5-ton truck, removed the cargo bed, and in its place welded a captured German anti-aircraft gun directly to the frame. They essentially created their own mobile anti-aircraft platform. It wasn't standardized. The recoil probably shook the whole chassis. But it provided mobile firepower they desperately needed. They saw a need, saw the parts, and put them together. It was like the world's most dangerous erector set. Medicine and survival gear saw this ingenuity too. When proper medical supplies ran low, soldiers got creative. Sterilization of instruments might be done with modified mess kit boilers. Splints were fashioned from pack frames and tent poles. In one recorded instance, a medic used the rubber tubing from a vehicle's fuel line and a cleaned-out cognac bottle to create an improvised drip for a wounded soldier. You use what you have. That pragmatism saved lives every single day. Of course, not every idea was a winner. For every successful scrap tech invention, there were probably a dozen that failed spectacularly. We don't hear about those as much. A homemade grenade that fizzled. A reinforced truck axle that snapped under the first bit of stress. That's the thing about this kind of innovation. It involved a lot of trial and error, and on the battlefield, error could be fatal. It was a high-stakes game of engineering roulette. So, what's the legacy of all this? It's huge. After the war, a lot of this battlefield ingenuity flowed directly into the civilian world. The mindset of improvisation and adapting technology fueled post-war industries. More directly, military field manuals began to formally include sections on improvisation and field expedients, acknowledging that soldiers might need to become inventors. The concept of user modification was legitimized. But on a human level, the legacy is about respect. It's easy to look at the grand strategies and the big names, but the war was also won by countless unnamed soldiers who refused to be stopped by a lack of official equipment. They looked at a broken world and saw spare parts. They were resourceful, clever, and tough as nails. In their own way, they were engineers, artists even, working in the medium of desperation and scrap metal. So, the next time you see an old, rusty piece of machinery, or you're trying to fix something around the house with the unorthodox solution, think about that. You're tapping into that same spirit, the spirit that says, there's gotta be a way. Just, hopefully with less explosives involved. Which of these historical scrap tech innovations do you think showed the most raw ingenuity? Was it the concrete artillery, the underground partisan workshops, or something else? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments.